I distinctly remember watching on the news people in the Middle East burning our flag and celebrating in the streets. And like, as a young man, I was in 8th grade, probably 110 pounds dripping wet, but, thought I was this tough guy. Whether my, young 8th grade version justification of it was right, I made a decision then that like, I eventually want an opportunity to carry a rifle so I can potentially go after these men that are burning our flag and want to destroy our way of life.
Welcome to the Mountain Tough Podcast, brought to you by Sig Sauer. What is up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Mountain Tough Podcast. We love seeing you guys come back to these episodes week after week. It is our goal to bring you inspiring guests, the best of the best, and break down their mindset, what it took to get them to where they're at. But we're looking for practical pieces of wisdom that you can apply to live that virtuous life, that abundant life, so that you can pursue your dreams, your passions, your purpose, and live that always ready lifestyle. If you're a first-time listener or a loyal listener, wherever you get your podcasts, if you could take a second and leave us a ranking or a review, that means a ton to us. We love seeing those come through. We love looking and reading your feedback. And with the algorithm, ranking and reviewing this show will get these episodes out to more people to transform more lives. Around the Mountain Tough Lab, it has been busy. The Mountain Tough Lab is cranking, working on some new content. So the Mountain Tough team has been busy working on a suite of daily products so that we can get daily workouts delivered through the Mountain Tough app that are new every 24 hours and expire every 24 hours. So with last year's product launch of the MGD took off. It was really incredible to see how many folks in the Mountain Tough community finished a program like Kettlebell 20 and then transitioned to MGDs. Now, a big part of that is because they're fresh every 24 hours. They're fully coached. So in your living room or home gym, all you need to do is hit play, and you're essentially live with Sarah, Nick, or myself and 2 Mountain Tough athletes, and you're getting a phenomenal workout with minimal gear done in less than an hour. The community requested that we keep building on that product. So stand by as we're getting ready to launch a gym-based one. So you'd have a squat rack, maybe an assault bike, but you're still going to get a live, fully coached workout that's brand new every day and expires every night. We're also working on a mobility daily to increase your functional mobility, as well as an elite level product. So keep an eye out for those. We will let the world know about those when they are ready through social media and the Mountain Tough email list, and you'll see them push live in the Mountain Tough app as well. Transitioning to today's guest. Today's guest is a special one for me. It's an episode you're not going to want to miss. I sit down and have a conversation with a friend of ours, Bear HANDLON. Bear is the co-founder and CEO of Born Primitive. I knew of Bear and I got the chance to meet him about a year and a half ago, and he's been a great mentor and friend of ours ever since. Bear is an inspirational guy, and this founding story of Born Primitive, a company that began with a need of his. He needed a better product. He couldn't find it on the market, so he designed it himself, and now it's a global lifestyle brand of high performance apparel. Bear is one of those folks that when he walks in the room, you instantly start working harder without him saying anything. Just his presence is going to be apparent on this conversation. If you're looking for a little fuel, if you're looking for a way to jumpstart your life, this is an episode you're not going to want to miss, especially if you have an entrepreneurial dream. If there's something you've been meaning to go after and you need a little courage, this episode will help. So stand by for my conversation with Bear HANDLON. I wanted to start with your founding story of Born Primitive because I know I've heard some of that from you before. I've heard some of that from buddies before, and I love it. It reminds me of the Mountain Tough story where it was pretty bootstrap. Like you had an idea and you went for it. But can you walk us through those first couple years?
Yeah, yeah. So it was about 10 years ago. I was just getting ready to join the Navy, and I've always been kind of a serial entrepreneur. So like growing up, I had like a lawn mowing business starting at like sixth grade, and I just always had that itch to kind of do my own thing and hustle. So got out of college. I was working for Red Bull doing marketing for them. Me and a college buddy had an idea prior to Born Primitive to launch a company. So we raised some capital. We went for it. Um, this is its own kind of podcast, so I won't go into all the details. But long story short, we caught a couple bad breaks, and it didn't pan out. So I had just come off of a failed business, and I was training heavy CrossFit at the time. I was competing in the CrossFit Games mainly as a way to get ready for military training, just to kind of change my training style. And we were doing a lot of heavy Olympic lifting as part of that training, and a lot of heavy training volume. So I was doing, the movement snatch, which I'm guessing most of the viewers or listeners are tracking what that is.
Yeah.
And when we would do heavy percentages, particularly like snatch high pulls, I was drilling my pubic bone on the transition portion of the lift. And we were doing it so frequently that like, if you banged up the pubic bone like a couple of days later and we had to do that movement again, it was actually kind of an issue because it's like I would avoid contact because it hurt so bad.
Yeah.
Which of course you can't do. So I essentially took an old football girdle from my college days. I cut out like the quad pad of like a McDavid girdle, that like the little honeycomb padding.
Yeah.
And I went over to my neighbor who was a seamstress, and I had her stitch that little pad into the groin area on a pair of like just, Reebok compression shorts or something. And that was kind of when the first prototype was born. Now, the idea was this was going to be one of one product. I would just wear it, a couple of days a week when I saw that snatch was programmed into the programming, and I would just wash it and that would be it. Right.
Yeah.
But when I started wearing it, guys at the gym were commenting like, holy shit, like you should market that. And I kind of discounted it at first, but then I started researching Olympic weightlifting forums to see if, see if I'm not the only idiot that has this problem. And I realized that the guys that were actually really competitive in Olympic lifting that were, world champions had that issue. And, one guy had fractured his pubic bone in competition. A bunch of other guys were putting like knee sleeves and stuff down their shorts, like before their big lifts to like had padding to where, you know what I mean? So
yeah.
I realized, okay, that it's a niche market, but there is a market there. I am solving some sort of need to a certain group of people. So long story short, I did a lot of research on supply chain and how to develop a product, kind of self-taught, read a bunch of books, and started getting a bunch of prototypes made from all these different suppliers. Narrowed it down to finally got one final supplier. So I was like, all right, good to go. Ordered 200 units, which was the minimum order quantity, which to me was an outrageously high number at the time. And then I went off to officer candidate school with the Navy. So that's kind of the beginning of Born Primitive. Of course it was out of the garage, I got my brother to give me a few bucks. But we didn't do this big capital raise and none of that fancy stuff, of course.
Yeah.
And, went to officer candidate school, was running it out of my room there in the barracks. So at night I would, sneak over to the corner of with the window and I had like 1 bar of service and I'm doing emails when everyone else is like shining their boots and getting their stuff prepped for the next day. So even in the beginning I was hustling, and just kind of had that scrappy mentality. So my wife at the time, Mallory, who's our co-founder, she was a full-time dental hygienist. So she kind of had to start helping out on the side as well. And eventually became her full-time job as well. But yeah, that's how it all started, man. Pretty much every weekend we would go to every CrossFit competition we could, just selling it from a card table basically. And then we got into hoodies and t-shirts, just like screen printed stuff, nothing crazy. I would be competing while also being a vendor. So like I would go like warm up, hit my heat, and then like come back to the booth and work for a couple hours. And then I'd be like, oh, I gotta go warm up again. So
Dang.
I was very immersed in the crowd. That's why we built in kind of in the CrossFit space, but we were very accepted because like it was very like organic to the community. Like when you're actually competing and also you're a vendor, that's about as endemic to a space as you can get. So that's what it was, man. Went out to the West Coast for more military training, continued to scrap and hustle through that. And then, at about the 5 I don't think I started paying myself for the first 6 years. I think Mal started collecting a check like at the 5.5 year mark. But we got into our breakthrough moment, I think, was when we realized that performance cut and sew apparel was like, was where like kind of the money was and where like we could really progress. Because I mean, anyone can screen print on t-shirts and sell, we're still selling the snatch shorts, but
Yeah.
like there's a plateau to that, right? You're not going to build like a real business out of one product.
Small market.
And so we were like, hey, let's get into more performance apparel. We'll still of course do t-shirts and stuff, and we want the brand to stand for something, but people need gear that's going to perform. And that's when we started getting into leggings and sports bras and same thing on the men's side, like workout shorts and things like that. And I think that's where we really started seeing that, hey, this is a real opportunity. Then I think 6 years in, we finally moved out of the house. It had taken over the whole house. Every guest bedroom had boxes to the ceiling. We were doing orders out of our garage. So I would get home from work. We would do orders until late into the night. And then Mal would like walk him to the post office the next day, or it got to the point he needed a car, which was a good problem to have to get it over there. Yeah, I mean, every spare second when I wasn't doing the military job was born primitive. I mean, I was even, sending emails out when I was on helicopters, like it was that obsessed, man. And cause you've been through the same journey. That's what it takes. But a lot of people that I don't think have taken that journey don't realize that. And that's why I get a little bit fired up when I hear must be nice, or like, you know what I mean? Because it's like, man, you have no idea.
Yeah.
And to say, you're not going to pay yourself for 6 years. If you were to propose to someone right now, hey, here's a proposal. I'm gonna get you. I want you to do something. There's an 8% chance of success. All of your free time is going to be sacrificed. You're not going to make a penny for 6 straight years. And at that point, then we'll decide whether it's successful.
Crazy.
Not many people at all take that deal, man. And that's really the stats. And thank God I was dumb enough to not realize that. But I think only 8% of startups actually pan out. And if you add, hey, by the way, it's going to lead to a divorce, and you know what I mean? You're going to miss out on all this fun you could have had when your buddies are just being normal, dudes. And, and it's not like I never enjoyed myself, but you know how it is, man. There's a lot of times you'd rather be hanging out and relaxing when it's like, man, I got to get to those emails, and it's got minimum 2 to 3 hours worth, and it's 10 o'clock at night already, and you're already smoked. And hey, at that point, the cavalry ain't coming, man, because the cavalry doesn't exist yet. You know what I mean? It's on you.
That's a wild startup story, Bear, because it's pretty unique compared to even things that I talk about sometimes, where like burning the ships and going all in was a huge key to getting Mountain Tough off the ground. And I totally agree that everyone talks about balance, and you got to have good work-life balance and family balance. And like I'm a huge believer in high quality of life, and I'm a huge believer in being there for my family. But there's also these seasons where things need to be extremely out of balance to get things off the ground. And you got to go through that, you got to go through those dedicated hours that are intense to get things to where you need them to be. And then you can start kind of setting up that balance where you need it. But the work it requires to get something off the ground, and the fact that you did that like in the evening hours outside of being a Navy SEAL is a pretty wild story.
Yeah, no, you're totally right, man. I think there definitely is a time, because I'm kind of with you. Like now that I'm 10 years in, I'm a little bit more conscious of balance. And now, I got a daughter that's about to turn 3. So I automatically have to be more balanced because there's no choice. And of course I love that opportunity, and it's a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
But I do believe there are times in your life where to take a deliberate approach to being out of balance, if it's for the right reasons and you're really getting after something, absolutely do it. Particularly these guys that if you're in your mid 20s and you're single and you don't have any family obligations, fellas or ladies, this is your time. Trust me, you are never going to get this opportunity. You're never as agile as you are right now, because you can move whenever you want. You barely own anything. So it's like, oh, you need me to load up a U-Haul and move to wherever to take this job for 2 years. Do it, man. Because you will never be more agile than you are right now in your life. As soon as you get a girlfriend and then kids and this and that, you're not as agile. You know what I mean? You can still pull it off, but I think, for me and Mal in that moment, it was just a deliberate, okay, we're going to see where this thing goes, and just so tunnel vision on you literally will do anything it takes to succeed. Failure is not an option. And I love the burn the boats analogy. We've talked about that a lot too. And for me, in a way, I wasn't really burning the boats because I had a full-time, active duty military job.
Yeah.
So I can't say I truly did burn the boats, but I think the mentality I approached it with was a burn the boats mentality, because it was a no fail. You know what I mean? Like, we'll literally do whatever it takes. I don't care if I have to be a vendor at 1,000 CrossFit events. Eventually people are going to know who Born Primitive is, and like, we're going to be successful. And that's kind of the approach we took. And we had to be scrappy because we never raised capital. Right. So, it got to the point where as we grew, a lot of these, and we became actually a formidable company. We were competing against brands like, I think take Noble, for example. That's one of our main competitors. I was told that until this recent sale, they had already raised $102 million in capital.
That's insane.
They're bigger than us, but not that much bigger. You'd be shocked. And it's like, okay, I got 10 grand from my brother on day one, and he made me put 2 grand of my own money in. And at the time I had $3,800 to my name. So that was half of my net worth. Right.
Yeah.
That was my extent of capital raising. Right. And we made that and turned that into what it is now, where some of these other companies that have founders that are a little bit more versed in that private equity VC world, and have the fancy degrees and stuff like that. And there's something to that game. Like, I give companies like that full credit, but we just took a completely opposite old school approach of like, all right, we always have to be profitable. We have to live within our means, because we're the ones paying for the next batch of inventory. We're the ones paying for, the athlete we might sign. We're not getting some PE firm to give us a check for $30 million and say, okay, hey, go do good things.
Yeah.
So that's something I'm really proud of, man. Because, man, what a wild disadvantage that is. You know what I mean? Like, if you were to say, hey, I'm gonna give you 100 million right now to spend on marketing. Like, imagine what you could produce with that. I mean, world-class athletes you could sign and this and that, and you could sponsor every event and everyone would know who you are.
Insane. Yeah.
We never had that, man. So we had to do it our own way, and by just being resourceful and super scrappy.
And I assume, looking at that now, looking back, I imagine you have no regrets that that's the way it went down.
Definitely not. I think back to the whole, like, if I could have done it all over again, would I have raised private equity money? And I'm on the fence on it, because I think if done right in with the right approach, it can absolutely be a force multiplier, because ideally you partner with someone that is a strategic partner, not just someone giving you money. And then they open up a bunch of doors for you that are, opportunities you wouldn't have maybe gotten otherwise. And also they know the game. So maybe they can teach you the game a little bit at a higher level, because that's, maybe what their portfolio brands, like what they're good at. So I think there's value there. I think the drawback, at least in my mind, and maybe this is because I just have this kind of perception of it, but I've seen so many brands, their DNA has changed when they bring on outside investors, to the point where it would like infuriate me, because it's like, now you have a bunch of dudes in suits from San Francisco, like calling the shots for your company because you like needed to raise money. And then you see what the identity of these brands can't become, man. And it's like, fuck that. What you see with me is what you get. I got an American flag on my arm. I got the Constitution on my arm. I got a goddamn skeleton, George Washington. Like, if some dude from San Francisco is going to roll in and see me and say, okay, that, you need to wear long sleeves because we don't want to project that to the consumer. Like, fuck that. I'm not going to play that game, and I never will. And again, maybe this is my own perception of what I see, but I've seen so many brands that their DNA was changed because now you have other interests in mind. And we could go on a whole, kind of tinfoil hat tangent on the big three and Vanguard and BlackRock and their influence in the world of what we see in these woke companies now. But for me, that was a big thing. Born Primitive will always be true to who we are, the DNA of who we are, and I will never let an outside entity ever influence that. And I think in 2 to 3 years we're going to entertain an investment, but it will absolutely be under that criteria of like, all right, if you want to be a part of this, you're on board with who we are, and you will not get me to waver on who the hell we are. You know what I mean? Until I take a dirt nap, hopefully many years from now.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of it, is we need to be able to control our own destiny and be true to who we are, and not be influenced because someone cut us a $20 million check and now I got to work for that guy.
That's awesome, man. And it gives you such a good insight on who your customer is and what they want too, when you're bootstrapping, and you're just, everything you're doing when you're bootstrapping has to work. there's very little margin for error. So we see that at Mountain Tough all the time, where it's like, we're gonna go big on this idea or this project or this marketing concept. It's different than folks that I see that have the big VC money behind them, where you see them burn in a lot of piles of cash. Where when you're bootstrapping, it's like, this has to work, or if it doesn't, we got to learn from it right away. And I personally love that. It gives me a bunch of fuel, because then it's like, we got to have this laser focus. It's got to work. And if it's not working, we got to learn and adapt real fast.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Because the failure means the business could potentially fail completely. Like if it was a big enough initiative that completely flopped, then like you might be dead in the water. Whereas, if you raise 20 million bucks and it's like one of the initiatives part of the plan doesn't work, it's like, all right, we still got 15 million. Like we're all right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I think it can lead to some sloppiness. And I think the market right now is much more sober on, there was all these brands that were raising millions and millions of dollars and they were never profitable. And it was under this like growth projection of like, in 5 years, we'll finally start making money. And because you got this COVID tailwind of consumer goods and these brands were just killing it, it inflated everyone's valuations. And now all these PE firms that invested are realizing that all those predictions are now not coming true. I mean, you have brands like Allbirds that were like the golden standard for like a direct to consumer brand, that like their stock's down like 90%, right? Jeez. And it's for a while. I mean, I don't even know what their highest valuation was, something absolutely outrageous. And I'm pretty sure they never made money. So imagine like going to an investor and being like, hey, we just did 100 million sales, but we lost 10 million, negative 10 million. And they're like, oh yeah, you're worth $1 billion. Like that was kind of maybe not that extreme, but that was the conditions we were in for a while. And for a guy that was doing it the opposite way, being like, hey, we have to make money because that's how we survive. It drove me crazy. Yeah. Because these people were getting on Forbes magazine and all this. And it's like, you guys have literally never made a penny. You guys are sloppy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? You're using other guys' money and you've never been profitable. So I could go on and rant about that all day. That's wild. But finally, the chickens came home to roost, man. And now all those brands are in real trouble.
I've used a ton of Bluetooth speakers over the years, and they all have never quite had enough output for me to really have an awesome home gym workout on a Bluetooth speaker. But the Turtle Box is in a whole new ball game. They have leveled up this product, so the bass and the output you get out of a Turtle Box is quite amazing. It's funny how we started using them at the lab. We had an awesome sound system at our new lab here in Bozeman. We were using it so much, we actually blew our brand new system out. We went right to the Turtle Boxes. And so we paired two together in the lab. And that was a lot of output for the Mountain Tough team and all of our testing to have phenomenal sound in our gym for a great workout with great music. We know there's a ton of Mountain Toughers training in their basements, in their garages, and I know a lot of you are looking for great sound to play some music in the background to your MGDs or your kettlebell diesel. This is a great product for you to check out. Turtle Box is at a whole new level. The bass and the volume you can get out of that box. It's a sweet product. You guys can check them out at turtleboxaudio.com. Again, that's turtleboxaudio.com. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough Podcast. I do want to shift gears and dive into your mindset. And so the mindset that it takes to be an entrepreneur is unique. The mindset it takes to get to where you're at now is unique. Certainly there's a lot of that never quit mentality in there. From just the entrepreneurship perspective alone, it seems like entrepreneurship is so much about just perseverance and just outliving people and just like never quitting or never backing down. But for you personally, how much do you think about your mental fitness, and like when did it start becoming a part of your life?
I don't think I ever actually started consciously thinking about like mental health until like honestly probably a year and a half ago. If we're being totally real. I mean, maybe a little bit before that, like in the tail end of my military career, there was more resources available and like, it was definitely more top of mind. But in the early days, high school, college, early BP days, early meals, like I was just so head down, hard charging that I don't know. I mean, you might be able to relate to this, but I think I don't think I have that stamina that I used to have. And I even kind of call myself out. Like if I lost a little bit of that, I had the tiger that I had when I was younger. And I think to some extent I have, but there was no need for balance. I didn't need rest. If I was staying up till 2 a.m, emailing suppliers that are 12 hours ahead and then like meeting like Lynn and Brian at the track at 5:30 in the morning to run 400s and then swimming for another hour. Like that's what we were doing. Like, I don't know. I laugh when I think back of like how little consideration I gave to like the need for rest. Now that's not the case. And, I'm 35 now, so maybe it's just a part of the age thing, but now I put a much more focus on it. I have a sauna at the house and a cold tub and, I try to balance my life. And even after a workout, I try to do a cool down where I'm actually like thinking about like, things and not just like running out of the gym all amped up, get right onto the next task. So, I think I'm definitely more conscious about it now, but it took a long time. And I think it took me redlining in my life to realize I need to do that, because I look back and I'm like, man, since like really honestly, since 7th grade, I've been going so hard and I've never come up for air once. And then, I eventually got a divorce and then, had a child and then I went through this crazy custody scenario. And like, I was just like, I finally hit my limit and it was like, okay, I got to reel this in because I'm burning the candle at 9 different ends and that wax is about to run out. So I had to do something about it and I'm still working through that, but that definitely have made some really good progress there.
Man, what was it like that year you went through the divorce? Because it wasn't just a divorce. It was a divorce with your co-founder and you guys continue to work together now even.
Yeah. I mean, shit, man, that's tough, it was one of those things that it's so hard to run a business with your spouse. And for anyone listening that does, like, I commend you. And that takes like, it's a very delicate thing, but unfortunately we were so wired the same and so hyper competitive that like, in my military job, I was gone, I think on deployment years, like probably 200 and 300 days out of the year when you take the training, that when we're stateside. And so for a normal couple, like in that dynamic, like the time these guys are home is very critical because you have to build that equity back up. And see, I mean, you're gone that much, your lady isn't stoked about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I would get home, it was like every waking second was about Born Primitive because it's like, oh, now I'm available more to help with BP. Or let's say we're doing a long, training thing all week, and I finally get a chance to call her from the hotel on like a Friday night. It's not like checking in, hey, how are things going? It's more like, hey, you see that email from that supplier? Hey, what do you want to do about this? And it was all these decision points. So like the relationship turned into this like only Born Primitive thing, and it wasn't like we were even conscious of it. It was just, we were so damn competitive. Like that's of course that's what we need to talk about.
Yeah,
because it needs to get done. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was no time for like, hey, how things going? Or I know I've been gone for a month, but like, are you holding up okay? Like, do we need anything? It's like, no, hey, we got to get that one payment, or hey, did you see these people send us the cease and desist letter? Shit, like what are we gonna do about it? Like it was always that.
Yeah.
And eventually, the check engine light went on that, and it took its toll. But cool thing is now, we're totally good. She's an absolute badass business lady, man. What I'm really bad at, she's freaking phenomenal at, and what I excel at, she's not as strong. So our skills overlap perfectly for a business dynamic. And she deserves a ton of credit, man, because she was, more of a savage than I am through this whole process. And, she was that like solo spouse, active duty spouse running this, like when I was gone too. So it's totally good now. And, she's doing great things, and she's married with a daughter, and totally happy for her. So, now we can solely focus on Born Primitive and not have to, take that home, which is, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild. It's wild. You guys were able to navigate through that and come out good on the other side from continuing to work together. I mean, that being extremely, extremely rare. It's super impressive. You guys were able to do that on like a friendly basis like that.
Yeah. And just like, to give a quick story to put it in perspective, we like never took a vacation. And when we did, I remember we went to Hawaii, and I think they're 5 hours behind, right?
Yeah.
When we went, we took like the first vacation in forever to Hawaii, and we were like, okay, well, let's get up at 4 a.m. and work until noon. So we're still like awake for the same hours our employees are. And then at noon, we'll start like our vacation day. Right. So we were going to bed at like 7:30, getting up at like 3:45, making a pot of coffee, and like we're on our computers by 4. And that was just like that wasn't even a debate. That wasn't like, shit, like we're on vacation. Should we really do that? Like we were both so aligned and laser focused. That's like, well, hell yeah, that's what we're doing. Like that's what needs to get done. And then, we won't get behind on work because like we did like an 8-hour work day with our employees at the same exact time. And then, at noon we'll start, we'll go, do some hike or whatever, like, normal freaking vacation people in Hawaii would do. And at the time, you don't even realize that that's not a normal thing. That was just how we were doing it. But that was, you can apply that kind of story to any example in an, 7-year marriage. And that's pretty much at all times was the approach.
Just extreme.
So for better or worse, I mean, of course, it led to a successful, at least thus far, business story. But it absolutely didn't come without the sacrifice. And you, as good as anyone know what that's like.
Where do you think this drive and work ethic came in for you? Is a lot of it from your childhood?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from my parents, kind of seeing they instilled that in an early age. And I think as I'm a dad now, I'm realizing that the real way that I'm going to need to instill that in my daughter is for her to witness my work ethic. I can't just tell her you need to work hard and chase your dreams and all this. Like she needs to see it. And then I think when, as she matures, it'll just naturally kind of become a part of who she is. So I was fortunate enough to have that. My mom would get up really early and go to work. My dad ran his own business, so he was doing it too. But then like the weekends, I'd wake up at 9:30 like a normal punk teenage kid, real late sleeping in. And my dad will have already mowed the lawn and like mowed the old neighbor lady's lawn for free because he's a good dude and like wanted to help her out. And like has already like done like a bunch of chores and he's like, you know what I mean? And
yeah.
He would let me know about it. Like, you know what I mean? And bust my balls for sleeping in, like a teenager, like that's what you do.
Yeah.
But over time you realize how much of an impact that has on your personality because you realize that's the standard. So, me and my 2 older brothers, we all had a lawn mowing business. That was kind of like, I think what got our entrepreneurial itch going. So, I would just walk around the neighborhood with a lawnmower and a weed whacker and like try to convince people to let me mow their lawn. And I think it was first couple lawns were probably just out of sympathy, like this little punk, like, yeah, sure. Here's $20. You can mow my lawn. But by the time I got into, probably halfway through college, I think I had like 25 or 30 lawns. So it was not like a crazy business, but, push lawnmower, throw in the back of a truck. Like it wasn't anything fancy. I didn't have like the big, 360 turn radius mowers and all that. I mean, we were push lawn mowing everything, man. So, I'm glad I did it. But I think, it started at a young age and, I think you're a product of your surroundings, but I also think a little bit of it has to be innate. I think some people might be just born with it a little bit. So, probably a little bit of both.
And did you grow up in a military family?
No. Both of my grandfathers were in World War II, but kind of skipped a generation. So I was kind of one of the first ones to kind of bring it back.
And when did that come up for you that you're like, I'm going in?
8th grade, 9/11.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember going home from school and what did it for me, they sent everyone home and there's like an early afternoon newspaper, like a special edition newspaper that was delivered like because of what just happened. And I remember I cut out that newspaper front page and I pinned it on my wall in my room. And it's actually followed me ever since. It went with me to college. It was in my locker during military training, and it's above the garage, above my squat rack right now, just thumbtacked to the drywall. But I distinctly remember the watching on the news, people in the Middle East burning our flag and celebrating in the streets. And like, as a young man, I was in 8th grade, probably 110 pounds dripping wet, but, thought I was this tough guy.
Yeah.
Like that was whether my, young 8th grade version justification of it was right. I made a decision then that like, I eventually want an opportunity to carry a rifle so I can potentially go after these men that are burning our flag and want to destroy our way of life. Mm-hmm. And, I think my reasoning became maybe a little more nuanced as I got older and got closer to making that decision. But the 8th grade version of me, it was like, all right, it's game on because there's grown ass men across the world that want me to die. Mm-hmm. And they're celebrating the death of, close to 3,000 people. Like, fuck that. So that was the decision. This is happening. And I almost did the Navy out of high school. I was talking to recruiters and I was just going to enlist. But football was progressing and, I got the chance to go play football at Yale. And like my parents were kind of like, hey, it's a good school. You can get a good education. It can open up a lot of doors for you later on in life. So, hey, why don't you go do this college football thing, get a degree. And if you still want to do it, then you can still do this crazy dream you have, but like at least go get an education first. And,
Yeah.
it was good in the fact that I did get a degree. I made a lot of great friends at Yale. I think I learned a lot. I think playing a Division I sport teaches you a lot as well. But I will say this, like I didn't miss out on all the wars. Like was by the time I went in, and then I waited a little bit after college too.
Mm-hmm.
I think my career in the military would have been wildly different had I done it right out of high school.
Yeah.
So the fork in the road, that leads to different life events. But I do think back of that often. Is had I done it when I wanted to. How different would have, what are my experiences in the actual military been as compared to what they were? But either way, like no regrets. I mean, you know what I mean? You make the decision in real time and you roll with it. But I do reflect on that a bit.
Yeah, that's crazy because it would have changed the whole BP history too, for sure.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, BP probably isn't a thing then at that point, really.
Mm-hmm. Wild. And like getting through SEAL training, and was there any mindset kind of hacks that you were leaning on at that time?
I think the biggest thing that helped, and I think most guys did this whether they realized it or not, but was by focusing on the wellness of the guys around you, it tricks your mind into not thinking of your own misery. And it's crazy, man. I mean, it totally works, and I've even now applied that to my life. This past year has been like probably the hardest year of my life. And I kind of realized halfway through the year, I was like, I need to pull out the old trick that I used in that training. And rather than focusing on my own misery, like I need to start reaching out to buddies and ask them how they're doing. And for my buddies that are struggling, really lean in, like really being there for them. Because when I'm having a conversation with a buddy who's going through a hard time, I forget about my own pain. And you know what I mean? And that's how, same thing in SEAL training. So when shit got real bad and you're cold and this and that, you're looking to your left and right and, hey dude, you good? You know what I mean? Like, and it's, so that I think is a total mind hack. I mean, I'm not a psychologist. I don't know what's happening in the chemistry of your brain for that to occur, but I think that was the biggest thing. And then, I think the biggest thing is just also, you talked about burning the boats. That's a situation where you absolutely have to burn the boats, because I think people that go into that kind of training, whether it's, SEAL training or any of these other hard selection processes, they think they want to do it. And they, in their mind, they've convinced themselves they want to do this. But I think a couple of things happen is, one, a lot of guys that don't make it, I think, wanted to say they were SEALs. They didn't want to actually be SEALs. Like they didn't want to, the guys that make it want to do the job once we're through the training. Like they genuinely want to do it. They don't want to be able to, they're not doing it so they can go to a party and tell someone that's who they are. Right. Those people don't make it. And I think the people that don't make it also didn't burn the boats, man. They think they burn the boats, but then as soon as it's 2:00 in the morning, you're in the Pacific, freezing cold, and you haven't slept in 3 days, you're like, well, I could go back to being an accountant, or, I could go back to being a bricklayer with my dad, or, you know what I mean? Like you start justifying like like that, maybe that boat does still exist and I can take that off ramp. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's usually what happens, man. So I think it's just going in, doing it for the right reasons, and then focusing on others more than yourself is a pretty good formula for kind of navigating that wild experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's such a good hack. It's so true how that works. Like even in the Mountain Tough Lab, we'll see that over and over and over again, where you're pushing some teams through like an extremely challenging team-based workout, and you'll watch some of those leaders rise up out of that occasion, and they'll start focusing on everyone else around them and start like really encouraging someone who's struggling, encouraging someone who's dying. And you'll see like almost right in front of your eyes, you'll see that person who is encouraging others who was just dying. They'll get like that second wind, and all of a sudden they're just starting to crush it. And that it is awesome too, how you connected that to how that same tool can work in all the other areas of your life. Because that's like the great thing about mindset and mental toughness is almost all of these things work in a backcountry hunting scenario, but they also are going to work out they're going to help in a workout scenario, but then they're going to help with a family scenario or a business scenario. I mean, the principles are the same, just applied in different aspects.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's kind of crazy when you think about it, because one might argue, hey, if you're really going through a rough time in life, you need to really focus on yourself and kind of go inward in this and that. And part of me is like, do the opposite, go external and really put yourself out there to try and help others. And before you know it, you've just like life hacked this, you know what I mean? This situation where you're showing so much concern for others that you're like, all right, I'm actually not doing too bad. You know what I mean? And I absolutely think it applies to a kind of a wide variety of circumstances, whether you're in the middle of a hard 30-minute workout and it's very, short lived, or, kind of zooming out to some life shit. I think it can work, man.
Mountain Tough is the fitness app trusted by the dedicated. Mountain Tough ethos is backed by, we've always wanted to be the best in the world at helping our customers become more mentally tough. So inside the Mountain Tough app, you're not only going to find all of our physical training programs, but you're going to find additional training as well so that you can stay sharp physically, mentally, spiritually, and nutritionally. The Mountain Tough app also allows you to train no matter where you are, anytime, anywhere. Additionally, the Mountain Tough app is going to have programs from beginners all the way up to elite athletes. And all of our programming is structured in a way that you can start with no gear at body weight, and you can go all the way up to programming that is full gear. So you can do that in a robust home gym or your local gym. There's no excuse for you not to start today. With Mountain Tough, you can conquer your goals with the ideal program for your lifestyle and schedule. Train with equipment or just your body weight on your phone, tablet, TV, or web browser. Most importantly, Mountain Tough will help you train your mindset so you are always ready for anything life throws your way. Mountain Tough is offering the Mountain Tough podcast listeners an incredible offer. 6 weeks free on the Mountain Tough app. All you need to do is use the code MTNTOUGH to redeem your 6 weeks of training. That'll be a 14-day free trial plus a whole additional 4 weeks of training. Just go to mountaintough.com and enter code MTNPOD for your 6 weeks free on the best-in-class physical and mental training app. You've been listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. I did want to shift a little bit and talk about BP Outdoor, because I thought that was super interesting when you kind of made that decision, because you guys have had a successful journey. You've built a great brand for the functional athlete, done a phenomenal job of that. And then recently you decided to go after the hunter and the backcountry hunter and also the tactical athlete. What kind of caused you to make that decision?
I think the idea was born when I was still in the service, and I was getting gear that was issued to me that I didn't think was great, particularly like kind of our outdoor layering system. We have like a 7-level layering, kit, starting with base layers, mid layers, outer layers, the whole deal. And we got trained on how to use that, and we did a lot of cold weather survival. And I was in a cold weather platoon, so we do some, mountain training and tele skiing, and we do SRs overnight, like up on the mountain. So we were a bit more in the elements. So obviously in those situations, as something wrong with gear really shows itself in a shitty environment, right? Mm-hmm. And you pay for it big time. I know you've been there.
Yeah.
So it definitely illuminated some of the discrepancies in the gear. And since I had an apparel company at the time, I was like, all right, I don't have the bandwidth to do this now because I'm active duty, and I'm good at fitness apparel. I don't know the outdoor apparel game yet, but I know I can get there. So that's kind of where the seed was born. I think another contributing factor was the gear we were getting issued in the military was by a lot of brands that actually didn't support the American warfighter. We were a part of our loadout was Patagonia. And I believe they sold it through a company. I believe it's called Lost Arrow. I don't quote me. I could be butchering this, but as I was told, it was because Patagonia does not want to formally associate with the special operations community because of what we do downrange.
Crazy.
So, but hey, they're glad to take the $100 million government contract from SOCOM, but like it's going to be through this like spin-off entity. And once I like, and again, this is what I was being told, and I think it's true, but you know, if someone fact check me on it, is like that really rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, wait a second, why are brands that don't even support what we do for a living making millions and millions of dollars off of us? And then also we're wearing it and kind of representing it because like, particularly in the special operations community, whether it's arrogant to say this or not, conventional units look at what you wear and you become a walking billboard for these brands, right? So it's like, not only do they not want to associate with us, but then they're getting the benefit of us basically free billboards for them as we walk into the chow hall or, you know, wherever, whatever military base we're on, and there's other units like observing us and, you know, how we run our kid and how we, you know what I mean? All that shit, like that happens. It's whether, you know, guys want to admit that or not. So it's there's two reasons I was fired up. And I said, eventually when I get the bandwidth, I'm going to change this. And plus, you know, since we did get exposure to kind of the outdoor layering system and I got training in it, I did understand how it needed to work. So, you know, I would say combining that knowledge with my knowledge for actually designing apparel, I was like, hey, I actually have a pretty good head start on this. But I also realized, you know, all of the stuff I learned was through a military lens. So that's why we brought in Aaron Snyder, because obviously, you know, he's one of the most, you know, well-known in the business, and he spends so many days in the field, you know, hunting, that I said, hey man, I want you to help us design this because I think I know enough to be dangerous, but I want you to kind of give the final sign off and make the, like basically do a lot of the features because you're the one actually spending 200 days in the field. Hunting. And if it can work for you, then it will work for everyone. So that was a pretty badass partnership. And Aaron's awesome. You know, we work great together, but pretty much all the stuff we have, Aaron, like he gets final say. So if he wants to do some wild pocket configuration on the pants and this and that, like if that's what Aaron's saying is what guys want, that's what we're doing. So, you know, it was fun. And so part of it was just my own kind of filling gaps in what I was seeing, but also on the moral side, like saying, all right, like let's provide gear, you know, from a brand that actually like supports what the end user's doing. And I know it's a little bit different in like the Western hunting space. But for those outdoor brands that are selling to the US government, like shame on you for like basically like for what you're doing. Like if you're not going to support us, then stop selling your gear to us. You know what I mean? Stop doing it through like another entity. That's completely fucked up.
Yeah. For hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. Right. So it's like, hey, if you don't want to associate, fine, but then concede the business and let other brands. So like that's, you know, we're a veteran owned brand and we're opening up our government business as well. Like I think we're going to mop the floor with these companies in a couple of years because I think the end user, like the military guy, is going to be asking for us versus the Patagonia. Right. Because they now know the vast differences in ethos of both brands. And I hope that happens. I mean, we got a lot of work to do. But eventually I hope the end user realizes kind of the politics behind some of the stuff they're wearing. And that maybe changes the tides a little bit.
And you guys are backing it up a lot from the business side, but also from the contribution side as well. So, I mean, BP's doing a ton to give back to the military and veteran community as well.
Yeah, that's been a big part of, you know, since day one, we've kind of hung our hat on that and said, you know, we have to use our platform to do some good. You know, we're proud to say we're coming up on $2 million total donated to date. You know, every year there's a major charitable goal for us. And yeah, it can't just be a punchline for us. We have to back it with action. So, you know, we wanted to be patriotic. We always say we would support our military and first responder communities. So it's like, all right, well, what are you actually doing about it? So I think by me serving, of course, I think that checks a box probably. And then, but also, all right, you got to put your dollars behind it too. And we're proud to say, you know, we've always been consistent in that. And the goal is obviously as the company continues to grow, our platform and our ability to continue to do that only increases.
That's awesome. And is there a new mission statement for 2024? Unleash grit, embrace grace.
Yeah, I mean, that was just kind of a mantra, you know, with the team. You know, we were talking through, and I guess it kind of gets in a little bit of the balance that we talked about, and maybe the more refined version of me. And I can't take credit because the team came up with that, and I thought it was awesome. But kind of getting back into that balance of there's a time to kind of get after it and really put the foot on the gas. But hey, let's also acknowledge that like life's tough and show yourself some grace, and it's okay. You're not always going to be perfect, and you know what I mean. And we thought that was a good kind of a good restructure of a little bit of the mindset of you don't always have to be getting after it and hard charging. Although like I still of course default to that. There is okay to have a little bit of grace in there somewhere.
Yeah.
You just choose your battles, you know. Can't always be grace and nothing's going to get done. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And you guys have done a great job of building a badass culture with some really good people. I mean, and really good people are attracted to good people doing great things that are usually above themselves. And I think like you've done a phenomenal job of that, of building a really awesome culture.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think for me, I think the consumer is getting to the point now where they're more conscious of the kind of ethos of the companies they're supporting. And if that's going to happen, then like I want it to be in a condition where we've always been true to who we say we are, and it's like we are as advertised. You know what you're getting. The buck stops with me. So none of that bullshit is ever going to infect Born Primitive, and we're not going to be for everyone. That's okay. I think that's the whole point, right? And we choose our consumers, not the other way around. We decide who that person is that wants to be a Born Primitive shopper. And I think too many brands try to play to everyone. And when you're doing that, you're playing to no one, man, because you don't stand for anything.
Yeah.
And I don't think that approach is sustainable. And it's particularly as competitive as today's market is. I mean, especially in the fitness space, man, there's like leggings and sports bra brands popping up like every freaking day. I mean, it's crazy. So it's like, how do you distinguish yourself in such a competitive field? You have to do something different. You got to cut against the grain a little bit.
Yeah. And you got to fight the good fight. I mean, fighting for the right, morals and ethics and values. You gotta stay strong and hold that position. Because if you don't, then you're just kind of, the other side is just overtaking the country.
Exactly. Yeah. And we've seen that. I actually tomorrow for our podcast, I'm interviewing a former executive from Anheuser-Busch. He was like one of their presidents. And we are going to talk about the backstory of woke capitalism and what is actually causing this huge surge and just this crazy shit you're seeing coming out from some of these corporations. And now that I know more about it, it's fascinating. So we're gonna pull back some layers tomorrow and really get into that. But I think there's opportunity for brands that just want to stand for good values, not controversial values. Like I would say, supporting your military and law enforcement, and being unapologetic to personal responsibility and not being a victim. I mean, I would say 10 years ago that wouldn't have been a controversial stance, but it seems like right now you're some trailblazer if you stand for like basic values. I mean, this is the shit that it was instilled in guys like you and me as kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not earth shattering stuff. You work your butt off, you apply yourself. The world owes you nothing. World meets no one halfway. Let's snuff that in for Lynn if you're listening. That's an over the top quote. The Stallone movie.
Such a good movie.
That's basic shit, man. That's not rocket science. But right now, it seems like so many brands are afraid to embrace like just normal values like that, and I think it's just crazy. And I think we need a little breath of fresh air. So we're hopefully going to provide that in some ways.
For sure. Yeah, it's big, and I think you'll probably learn tomorrow on your that podcast with the executive is like the woke culture has trillions of dollars behind it. So it's like, we all have to stand together.
Yeah, it's great, dude. We could talk offline about it, or talk about it now. But when you look at it's just follow the money, man. It's so crazy, and I don't really know how we do fight it, because these corporations think they're doing this public good, and it's their obligation. You know what I mean? But I think the problem with that approach is you're assuming that your moral footing is solid, right? Like you're making the assumption on behalf of everyone else that we know best. So shut up. And this needs to happen, this transition and this, but they're wrong. You know what I mean? Because a lot of these values are very degrading to our country. And if instilled in an entire generation of our youth, then we're not going to recognize who the hell we are in 30 years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then the magic of what made America what it is, and that American spirit and the willingness to dare and be great. And it's kind of like by selection, the people that were willing to come across the ocean and do this daring crusade, to just like those are our ancestors, right? So like by selection there, we are, again, this will sound arrogant for people that aren't American, but that's what created kind of the exceptionalism in the first place.
The risk takers,
yeah. And we're going to lose that if we don't do something about it. Particularly if you look at our school system, man, it's like these kids are getting infected with thoughts of that America's bad. What is that going to do when these kids are all 25 years old? Do you think those are the kids that are going to want to join the military and fight for their country? No, they're going to be the ones, well, technically, in the 1700s, we were doing this, and the 1800s. So like, I'm not proud to be American. And then, you know what I mean? What happens when there's a world conflict? I would like to think there's enough guys like you and me that, rough around the edges guys that just, good American values that we're still going to be there. It's not like we're going extinct. But I do think you apply that brainwashing to one generation of people, man, and we won't even recognize it. And then guys like you and me will be old dinosaurs, and we'll be 80 years old saying, hey, the days of that are over, and this is just the new normal. I sure as hell hope it doesn't get to that, but we'll see.
Well, and it can change. It can change so fast. I mean, look at how much has changed. I'd say negatively from this conversation perspective. Look how much has changed in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
It slips fast.
Well, it's ironic because in 2019 is actually when a lot of that with the big three with BlackRock and Vanguard started to actually occur. Like there was an agreement that they all came to as far as how corporations were going to kind of exist and the goals of the corporation. So that's actually, you're damn near spot on as far as the timeline of when that actually all started to get real bad.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I do have hope that we can like with good people doing the right things, we can make a positive impact.
Yeah, no, I think so too, man. There's still, obviously I think the majority of people in this country, we all agree. I think unfortunately they've gotten really good at making us think we don't agree. Mm-hmm. And particularly a lot of the media and our politicians and these big corporations have created this perception of what public opinion actually is. And it is not representative of the masses. And unfortunately they're very effective at it because everywhere you look, you see it. And as someone who cuts against the grain, you start to question your own beliefs. So like, am I the only guy who thinks these normal things? Like, then you start to question, like, do I need to refine my beliefs? Because it doesn't seem like anywhere I looked, I don't see this anywhere. And I think that's the big danger. But then it's like, you talk to your neighbor, you talk to your buddies, this and that, all these people you talk to, and you realize over the course of a couple of years that no one actually ever subscribes into these wild beliefs. And then you become more confident in your beliefs that, okay, no, I'm confident in this. And so I think it comes down to people not being afraid to be vocal out of fear that they possess some fringe belief, because it's not a fringe belief. You represent the masses. So don't feel like you're going to get canceled. So if the school board's doing some bullshit stuff with your kids, and go to the school board meeting and raise hell. You're not the minority. All the other parents probably think the same thing, but no one has the balls to do it because they don't want to be labeled like a bigot, right? So go raise hell. If you're on social media, like I know social media gets annoying with politics, but even as brands, as Born Primitive, like we've kind of been more vocal lately, particularly now that we have the podcast, to being like, listen, I'm not hiding anymore. I played it real safe for the, particularly the early days because so much was tied to it. But I kind of realized like, hey, someone's got to hit back, man. Mm-hmm. And we have a brand that, has all these followers and all these fans. Like we have an obligation to at least offer an alternative and make people realize that there are level-headed corporations and entities that still exist that don't subscribe to this crap. Yeah. And man, the response has been freaking awesome. Now we still get the dickheads that comment this and that. I'm not going to shop you anymore. Hey, dude, you were never shopping us anyway, so get the hell out of the comments. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like move over. I don't care about you. I'm not losing sleep because some guy from San Francisco that doesn't want to shop Born Primitive. Well, he wasn't our customer anyway. We know who our customer is, and it's not that. So hopefully people can feel empowered to know that they aren't kind of in the minority of thought. It's actually they're in the majority of thought, but very smart people at very high level have pulled on strings to make it appear that it's the opposite. And I think more and more people are becoming aware of that, and hopefully that will cause at least some sanity to be restored back in our society.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. And then we have a responsibility to use our platforms for the most impact we can with our limited time on this earth. And I think like these podcasts are a great example of that, with your podcast, with the Mountain Tough podcast, we have the ability to really engage in these long form discussions with our customer base. And that's I think a huge part of this battle for sure is digging into these details a little bit deeper.
Absolutely. I think the long form content has been a great remedy for it. You got guys like Rogan, that are very good that have just kind of offering kind of thought provoking alternatives to like kind of the prevailing thought that, is being pushed by the media. And you're like, you start scratching your head. And, obviously guys like that, his reach is so massive. So I think it has been a great thing. And I think obviously the long form allows you to go into more detail and more nuance other than just some headline and some quick little soundbite that they selectively edited. You got a guy that gives an hour speech and they'll take a 30-second clip and stitch it up and it'll make it sound like he said something totally not what he said in the speech. You know what I mean? So long form is a way. There's no way to take it out of context if you listen to the whole thing. So I think it's a good thing, man.
Cool, man. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. I know you're a busy guy and have a lot going on, but as we close up, any big announcements, any big things that you're working on in the next couple of years, next few months, anything you want to shout out for?
Sure. Well, Born Proof Tactical just launched recently. Really stoked on that. So we have kind of the full, head to toe kind of operator kit, clothing, not like body armor, stuff like that. Really stoked on how that turned out. So if you're in the market, if you're military, law enforcement and need good gear, check that out. It does have its own website. So bornprooftactical.com and then bornproofoutdoor.com also has its own website. On the outdoor side, we're stoked to finally launch our rain gear coming. So that'll be coming out. I'd have to check with Kurt, but it'll be this year. And we identified this basically, 4-way stretch event fabric. So event, Aaron's big on as opposed to Gore-Tex. He thinks event is a lot better. So we found a 4-way stretch kind of rain gear because again, from the military experience, like we'd have to be rucking up a mountain and our rain gear didn't stretch and you got 80-pound pack on, you got to do this. That becomes significant when you're climbing over rocks and that. So we found this 4-way stretch rain gear and Aaron tested it and it's freaking awesome, man. So that'll be a big release for us on the outdoor side. And then we just launched our Savage One training shoe last year. It's freaking awesome. So if you need a good training shoe, check that out, bornproof.com. But a lot of shit in the works, man. It's been a wild ride. Now that we have tactical and outdoor and shoes, it's like a whole nother beast, dude. So I'm just trying to keep my head on straight, but we're pretty stoked at how it's panned out. And we're just getting started, man. And I appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate you. I got the Savage One a month ago. That's a badass shoe. It's
nice, dude.
Yeah, good. It's a phenomenal training shoe.
Good, man. Well, and I think Tony was saying you guys might want to get the kitted out. So hit me up. Yeah, obviously we'll make that happen. We love what you guys are doing out there, and hopefully we can come see you. I think in June is the TAC Big Sky. I think it's going to be.
Yep. And then Tough
so maybe
Fest.
Hopefully we can get out there, man, and move some weight around with y'all and get after it. So looking forward to that.
Cool. Yeah, we got to get you out to the lab. Tough Fest will be the day before TAC, so it'd be awesome to get the whole crew out here.
Okay. And is that like, do you guys just like work out all day and then like cook out burgers and shit or what?
Yeah.
What is
just huge community event. So we'll do like an early morning mountain ruck up to Baldy, which is like our local close big climb. And then we have guest speakers, team-based workout. And then we did a big like Conquer Hunger food drive last year for some Gallatin Valley kids. And then more guest speakers in the afternoon. And then everyone usually rolls up to TAC the next day.
Nice.
Yeah.
Heck yeah, man. Well, I'm sure we'll probably be there. So look forward to it. And I guess I'll have to get out ahead of my my training so if I don't get my ass handed to me on that morning ruck.
Yeah. It's a shocker with the elevation out here.
Oh man, yeah, no, that's no joke, man. You get caught in that and you're out of shape. You're in big trouble.
Well, thanks, Bear. Appreciate you. Appreciate what you're doing, and keep fighting the good fight.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks, man. Thanks for listening, everyone. That was a great conversation with Bear. Bear is an inspiring figure. You can see the passion on his face. You can hear the passion in his voice. He is doing whatever it takes. He's taking a stance for American values. He's not going to waver on that. He's not going to bend on that. And I do think that is the golden nugget you need to take away from today's episode is you got to stay in the fight. You got to fight the good fight. And no matter how hard the pressure comes at you to bend, you do need to make that stand for what you believe in and don't waver in that stance. What a great conversation with Bear. He is always inspiring. Remember, you can follow Bear by following him on Instagram at Born Primitive. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. We love having you guys here. Make sure you leave a review wherever you get your podcasts and check us out on YouTube as well at Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. Thanks, stay dangerous, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to the Mountain Tough podcast. We'll see you next week.